I work as a babysitter for millionaire families. My latest client made me quit my job for good. After my first babysitting job, word soon spread around the rich neighborhood that I was great with kids. Business started booming, and I even got a call from a couple who offered to pay me double my usual fee. I was ecstatic, but I never could have guessed that this mistake would ruin my life forever. After my dad dropped me off at their house, he waited for me to knock on the door. Then he drove off once the door opened. This old lady was standing there and she asked, "Can I help you?" I told her who I was and she looked totally baffled. Then a 40-year-old man ran up to us. "Sorry, my wife gave you the wrong address. Thank God I didn't miss you," he said, gesturing to his car. "We used to live there and my wife always forgets our new address," he explained. Looking back, I shouldn't have been so naive. It could have saved my life. We drove for about 15 minutes and soon arrived at their house, which was the nicest house I had ever seen. The architecture was modern and their garden was so beautiful. The wife, who was thin and really pretty, was also outside, waving. She apologized, then we went inside. "Our little angel is asleep upstairs," she goes. "Please don't wake her up. Just stay down here unless she cries. She's a very light sleeper, you see, so we'll be very upset if you wake her. We'll be up till dawn, really, in that case," she said. I was nervous because the house was nice and they looked all rich while I was in my grubby runners with my messy hair in a ponytail. They were very dressed up, and after showing me the living room, where bowls of chips and lollies were sitting out, they left, after once again telling me not to wake their daughter. Now, I found it strange that they hadn't introduced me to their child. Most of the time, the kids were awake when I got there, and we played and watched television until way past their bedtime. The only other baby I babysat for slept most of the time, but the parents told me to check on her a few times and change her nappy when needed. I just sort of sat there, feeling cold in the big, sparsely furnished house, but they hadn't told me about heating, and I hadn't thought to ask. The food they put out was stuff I didn't like, salt and vinegar chips instead of plain, and the chocolate biscuits had an off smell to them. Choosing not to eat them probably saved my life. Something about the darkness and silence of the house left me feeling a little edgy. I decided to see if there was anything else to eat, and went looking for the kitchen, which I eventually found. The shiny metal fridge was almost completely empty, aside from a carton of milk, and the cupboards were also very empty. At this point, I was starting to get creeped out. What kind of family doesn't have any food for their kids? Curious, I started to explore the rest of their house. It was horrifyingly dark, and most of the doors were locked, which wasn't too uncommon, though people mostly just locked their bedroom door or maybe a messy storeroom or something. I decided to search upstairs next. Now, on that note, I hadn't heard a peep from upstairs, and I started to get anxious because what if something was wrong with the baby? So I made the decision to go upstairs. I walked up and it was pitch black up there. I tried a door, locked. I tried another door, locked. All the effing doors were locked. Now who locks an infant in a room like that? I started to panic and sort of realized something was very wrong about the whole thing. I decided to call my dad to come and wait with me. So I went to call him when I realized the address he had was the one of the old lady, their old address. I realized at that moment they didn't want my dad to know where they really lived. I started panicking and just sort of froze in the dark hallway. I walked slowly down the stairs, making sure to stay quiet. My heart was pounding at this point, so I walked to the front door and tried it, but it had been deadlocked. I walked through the house to the back door, and again, deadlocked. I was trapped in this effing house. I could have called the police, but I had no address to give them, and I was starting to feel like maybe I wasn't alone in the house. With shaking hands, I went into the living room and packed my stuff into my backpack and just sat on the edge of the couch wondering what to do. I decided to try a window or something, so I did. I tried every window, and all of them were locked. At this point, I swore I heard a noise from outside. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I thought about how bad it would look if I left the baby and just ran off, but I didn't feel safe. I felt like I was going to die. So I was standing in the living room, wondering what the F to do, when I heard a faint clicking sound. The sound of a door being unlocked, the back door. I just froze, ringing in my ears, liquid stomach. I heard footsteps walking slowly through the house, and I crept shakily into the dark kitchen and then through to the laundry. I crawled into one of the big cupboards next to the washing machine and sat trying to control my breathing and trying not to be sick. I heard the footsteps walking through the house, along with muffled voices. When the footsteps reached the laundry and stopped, I thought my heart would pound through my chest. "She must be upstairs," the man's voice said, and I heard the footsteps walk away. I was sure the wife would be waiting outside the cupboard with a kitchen knife, but I opened it anyway, and she wasn't. I heard them walking upstairs and crept quickly through the house. I opened the back door and ran, hearing it slam behind me and knowing they would be after me. I didn't even look back. I just ran through to the front garden and down the driveway, and I climbed over the gate so quickly I scraped all up my legs, but I didn't stop running. Adrenaline works wonders even for me as a fairly unfit teenager. When I got to the nearest main road, I immediately called my dad. Every time a car drove past, I ducked into a yard or under a tree because I was sure it was them. When my dad arrived, I told him the story. I've never seen him go so white. We went to the police and everything, but I hadn't even stopped to look at the street name when I was running away, so I had nothing to give them other than a description of both of them and their very fake names. They didn't ever track down the couple either, even though they drove me around the suburb for hours trying to help me remember the house. I couldn't remember. I'd been too scared, and it had been too dark. How I wish I'd been more observant. What scared me most was that they had my phone number, but unsurprisingly, I never got a call from them again, as I had changed my number the next day, and I haven't babysat since. Well, I say I never heard from them, but now that I think about it, there was one call, a few months ago actually, An unknown number, of course. When I picked up the phone, all I heard was a baby crying on the other end. But not a real baby. A fake cry, like one of those dolls you can buy. I guess I'm hoping it's just some prank caller messing with me.